Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. Story number 1. Glory, written by Echoing Cascade. 224 had trained for 5 years, 6 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, and approximately 3 hours for this moment. The human known as 224 was going over everything that had led to this moment. Today, the UNA would be shown the power of the human mind. They had invaded Earth one afternoon some 6 years ago, unimpeded by the Terran fleet or ground forces. Not because they wouldn't fight or found such a venture pointless, but because they simply couldn't. The Una, a race of powerful telepaths, had targeted the young spacefaring race. The fight lasted until their colony ships entered the solar system. After that, the Terran's defenders found their will to fight gone. They had known the Una were on their way thanks to the Slot, a nomadic race of traders and sometimes pirates who risked what little they had left after a costly war with humanity to warn them. Humanity had left Sol with as many civilians as they could fit into ships. Throughout the known galaxy, the Una were known for conquering inhabited systems, doing horrible testing and medical procedures to the local populace, and then leaving when they failed to find what they were looking for or got bored. 224 had been one of the many unlucky ones left behind. On that day, 224 had been caught, tested, and unlike many others who were directed to walk into the colony ship to never return, was given a white room, food, water, and an injection that inflicted blinding pain that only subsided with unconsciousness. Upon waking, 224 was in a larger room with 3 other children. They all received the same mental command: kill. The children did not use fists, feet, knives, elbows, or teeth, however. New abilities manifested instead. One produced electricity from his hands, another seemed to blur in and out of existence. 224 had a headache, with which resulted in 3 other children's heads popping like overripe grapefruits, crushed in a vice. 224 was then ordered to return to the tiny white room. This went on every day for a month. At first, 224 would try to control this power, refusing to kill for the masters, but the struggle was futile. Worse, the fights were increasing in intensity, and if 224's concentration wavered for even a second, death would be inevitable. 224 slowly mastered these new mental powers, becoming able to see into the minds of the other children, devise strategies to defeat them, and by ignoring every feeling, forgetting every semblance of self, 224 became powerful, more so than even the Una knew. One day, 224 had been sent to kill again, but this time, rather than simply following orders, 224 tried to trace the signal back to its origin. 224 learned what the Una wanted, and how he was of great interest to them. It was a great shock to see himself the way the Una saw him. He had forgotten so much of himself to survive these last 2 years that he had forgotten almost everything that made him, well, him. The Una wanted to create a sentient creature who could wield their powers but knew emotions. They weren't cruel entities deriving pleasure from others' suffering. They didn't do this to satisfy some perverse curiosity. They were organic machines wanting to learn to feel. 224 saw something else, a crystal of some sort they used to send the telepathic commands. These crystals were present on every Una colony ship, and it was there that he would strike. 224 spent the following years sharpening his powers to perfect blade. He would destroy these crystals and shatter the Una's minds. To do so, he had to increase his training to beyond anything he had done before. He would not simply forget anything that could have hindered his control. He would remove it from his mind, his past, his aspirations, his family, and even his name. All that was left was the number he had been given by the Una, 224, and the goal of destroying them. It was now the day of reckoning. 224 had gone to the very limits of the powers the Una had cursed him with. He could now see them in their astral forms and how the crystals linked them all. He could even enter this realm himself, but not for long for fear of being found. When the order to leave his room and enter the battle arena was given, the Una received a single whispered response: "Heard by every Una in the galaxy? No. 224 then poured every ounce of power into the crystal of the Una who had given him the order, to little effect. So he went beyond what he knew was his limits. Blood began to flow from every orifice. Pain, like nothing he had ever felt, assailed every cell in his body, and the crystal barely shook. He had failed. He had given his all, and he'd failed still. For a moment his memory drifted back to a girl that he had liked. Her smile as she passed revived feelings of guilt and shame he didn't know he still had. The astral eyes of every Una snapped back to look at him, and the crystal showed a tiny, insignificant crack. 224 saw this and redoubled his efforts, but he couldn't remember anything else. When thinking of his parents, he couldn't see them as anything other than blurred outlines. He felt so little by this point. Then he remembered he was not alone in this building. He reached into the minds of the others' test subjects. He channeled anything he could into the crystal. A song from an old game that always resonated with a young man. A picture of a family a young girl recreated in her mind every night before going to bed. A pet, long dead, who would protect its honor from the dreaded vacuum cleaner. He let loose these memories, and more importantly, the emotions they represented to the Una. By this point, his body had begun to give. His flesh and bones were burning from the effort and power he wielded, his own astral shape being the only thing keeping him alive. One of the Una, a warden of the arena, snapped out of his emotional attack long enough to warn 224 that if he continued, he would cease to exist. 224 looked into another mind, that of a young boy. The boy looked up to his older brother. He was his hero. He collected these tiny little figurines he liked to paint. He had told him the lore behind all of them and gave him his favorite unit before going to war. 224 smiled at this memory, and to answer the Una warden, he quoted from that boy's mind, "But those we cherish, we die in glory." 224's astral form leapt into the crystal, and for a fraction of a second the Una knew love, hate, obsession, indifference, love, revulsion, happiness, sadness, and a myriad of other emotions. And then, when the crystal shattered, they knew no more. After this, a few things changed in the galaxy. Humanity returned to Sol and brought the Slon with them, and insulting, or worse, attacking a Slon in the presence of a human became a synonym with death. The destruction of the Una brought a new era of exploration for the races. They no longer lived in fear of encountering them. And on the place where once stood a white Una building, there was a large humanoid hologram with a small gold plaque that reads, 224, the Lamenter. End of story. Story number 2. Ring of Sol, written by British Tea Company. Larango. The Emperor nodded in acknowledgement as his view screen displayed the short, grey alien on his view screen. It did not look pleased to see him. The Emperor of Sol, the alien said, as his massive eyes slitted at the sight of the human Emperor. Not anymore. Emperor Sephriel smirked slightly. I am Emperor of the Galaxy now. Perhaps the information you keep on the rest of the galaxy is not nearly as good as you imagined it to be. Nonetheless, those working in Imperial intelligence still remain second to none. The alien's eyes blazed for a moment as it stared back at the Emperor. How did you find us? Your workmanship was shoddy. It clearly didn't last. The Emperor chuckled as he leaned back in his throne. The draconic visage upon the chest plate leered in through the view screen with a fierce grin. However, my engineers and archaeologists were still able to work with what was left of your technology. A lesser race would have mistaken your ruins for simple space dust. We discovered telltale clues of your origins, and of course, your home world. To be situated at a system so close to the galactic core must make you feel like you're at the center of the universe, doesn't it? Tread carefully, human. Wild people are conquered the stars while you were still gathering wheat in a field. That time has long passed, alien, said Emperor Sephriel, drawing dismissively. If there was one thing, however, I find still redeeming upon your dead civilization, it is your world, your sanctuary. It tired many of the brightest minds I had, but regardless, we still found it. Your home world. The color drained from the grey alien's face, as he looked quite pale, even for his species standards. His side of this view screen soon displayed a massive ring world that surrounded the entire star. It was, unmistakably, the very world he was sitting on at this moment. I am impressed, the Emperor nodded approvingly. It takes quite the civilization to create such a fascinating structure, to garner the resources for a construction the size of a planetary orbit. I am fascinated. Then by all means you should remain fascinated. This ring is a testament to our people's power. Your people's former power. It's shameful that this is the last ring world still existing in the galaxy, all the others having long failed and crumbled from your people's fall. This ring, the testament of power and prestige, is not worthy to be held in the hands of your race. You would not dare take it from us. Why wouldn't I? I am the Emperor of the Galaxy. You are keepers of decaying and dying artifact, ruined by your people's fall. As this galaxy is mine, your ring world will be mine too. And I do not intend to keep such an item hidden away at the galactic core. After I'm done wiping you out, I do not care if it takes me 100 million ships to drag that baggage back to our capital. Your ring will do nicely in the Sol system, where I will restore it to the glory of a race who is worthy of having such a jewel. End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.